this channel once again. And as we continue to guide you through the darkness, you shall see that even unlikely heroes rarely get a day off. Lake trip. Randy lovingly slid his prize fishing pole into the back of his truck. "Ain't you ready yet, ding dong?" he asked his friend. He could hardly see Dave in the dim early morning light. A slightly chubby man in large Hawaiian shirt and shorts hobbled up to the truck winded. He carried an old, battered, simple cane pole. "I'm ready, Randy," he said, huffing. "God dang it, Dave," Randy said, shaking his head. "We're going to pick up Pop's boat and go out to the channel out in the middle of the lake." "So?" Dave asked, scratching his head. Randy just shook his head and sighed. "Never mind," he said, moving to get the old red Ford pickup truck. "Come on, you can use one of Pop's old rods." They rolled in silence, savoring their McDonald's coffee and Mac muffins. Randy looked over at his friend, who was looking around. "What the hell are you trying to break your neck to see?" "Over," Dave said, his mouth full of the greasy breakfast sandwich. Randy's eyes narrowed as he watched the dark country road. "I know you have a muffin, Dave. Doggone it. What'd you see?" he asked again. Dave swallowed, shook his head, and said, "Nothing. I don't know, Randy. I just thought I saw something." "What'd you think you saw, dadgummit?" Randy asked, clearly exasperated. "A bird is all," Dave murmured, looking again out the window, fear in his eyes. "Oh," Randy said, making sure that he watched the road again. "Probably just an owl back from its hunt. They're thick in this area." The two friends finally had the boat hooked up and was trying to start the engine to do the normal checks that minimize the risk of getting stranded out on the lake. "Well, shit," Randy said, looking at the open engine. "What's wrong, you think?" Dave asked. Randy turned to his friend. "Well, Dave, if I knew that, we'd be out on the lake already. Poles in the water and Pabst Blue Ribbon in our hands. I only care how many beers we have left. Oh, yeah. I bought 2 30-packs. Got them at the drive-thru this morning," Dave informed his friend absently. "Hey, it sounds to me like the thing's not getting any gas." Randy looked up sharply at his friend and said, "Well, Dave, of course it sounds that way. Pop just spent a fortune on a new fuel pump and getting it installed." He tried to sound as if Dave was speaking the obvious. "Probably clogged lines. Should have probably changed those lines." Dave nodded apologetically. "So what do we do?" Randy thought for a moment and then smiled. His genius should surprise no one as he walked toward his father's shed. "Hey, wait, Randy." "What?" he said, stopping. "Didn't you install that thing? Shouldn't you be the one you're angry at, since you didn't change out any of the fuel lines or nothing?" "Dave, you sound nuttier than squirrel shit. Now leave me alone. I gotta get this fixed." Dave watched his friend in dumbfounded wonder as Randy came back dragging a little air compressor and hose. "What's that for?" he asked. "Dadgummit, Dave. If you keep asking me these stupid questions, we ain't never gonna get out on the lake," he told his friend as he attached the air hose to the fuel system. "Okay, now when the gas starts to dribble out a little bit, tell me so I can stop." Randy had just begun when the loud compressor came on, drowning out any of sounds. Indeed, only after a moment, the fuel began to dribble out just as Randy had predicted. "Okay, Randy, it's coming." Randy kept the air going. The loud compressor continued to blow out his friend's voice. He watched the engine closely, where he had the hose attached, and didn't see his friend waving his arms. "Randy, Randy, Randy!" Dave screamed, sounding like a 9-year-old little girl. "Gas is guzzling out!" he screamed. "Indeed, it's coming." Randy kept his and flow freely out of the carburetor into the bottom of the boat. "Oh crap, Dookie!" Randy cried and cut off the air compressor, going off just as he did. "Why didn't you just stop me, Dave? Dang it!" Randy grumped and went toward the house and came back dragging a water hose. Dave's pudgy face grew worried. "Dave, I'm not sure water is a good idea. I mean, you'll just spread our gas around." Randy ignored his friend and began spraying out the inside of the boat. He took a long time and made sure that there was no residue in the bottom of it. Okay, go ahead and try cranking it, Randy told his friend. I really don't think that's a good idea, Rick. Just shut it up and pull the trigger on the damn thing. We're wasting daylight, Dave. Dave shook his head and got out of the captain's seat of the little boat and jumped down so that he could turn the key while standing on the ground, far away from any source of fire. The engine started right up with no issues, and Randy began to make sure everything worked without any interruption. Finally, he clapped his hands and turned off the engine. How much gas we lose? Dave asked, relieved. Randy checked and shook his head. Most of it. He said, well, we'll have to fill her up again, dang it. He eyed his friend. More time. Dave smiled. Don't worry, Randy, we'll make it out there. Randy glared at his friend for a moment and then turned and walked toward the driver's door of the pickup. I hate you when you're an optimist. I just want to get out on the lake. The more time we waste, the less time we got to drink. Dave's attitude was borne out, for the two friends found themselves with oversized life jackets, bright orange yet faded with age, their poles finally in the water. All right, Randy said, leaning back, trusting the anchor to keep the boat in position. Beer me, brother, he said. Dave nodded and headed slowly to the front of the boat, where the old igloo ice chest sat. He opened it and tossed a shiny can to his friend. Randy eyed the beer he caught. What in God's good name is this crap, dimwit? He said, holding the can up for his friend to see. What? Dave asked, clearly confused. You got Natty Light, doggone it. That shit's devil's water, Randy told him. Why would you do such a thing to me? Randy, Dave said, clearly frustrated. You wanted a lot of beer, and Natty Light is cheap. Randy knew they were on a budget, so he just shook his head. Well, he popped the tab. This'll go bad. He paused, taking a deep slug from the 12-ounce beer, then belched loudly, screwing up his face. Take my word for it. Every time we drink this shit, bad stuff happens. It's devil's water, I tell you. It's like my poor dead wife and tequila. Dave shook his head. I thought Don and Joe just divorced you, he said. I didn't know she died. Randy's face grew flush, and he grimaced. Well, she's dead to me. Both grew quiet, missing a few bites by any untroubled by such facts. They were just there really to get away from people and drink beer. That's what fishing is to most people. Perhaps 3 of those dangerous natty lights later, Dave got a bite and hookup to what seemed to be a very large fish, his pole bent almost in half. Nice, Randy told his friend, patting him on the back. Don't lose him, he said. After about 15 minutes, Dave tried to wipe the sweating forehead while still fighting the fish and never stopped pulling. Almost lost hold of his bent pole. Careful, Dave, gall damn it. You got a monster on, Dave cautioned the man, and Randy cautioned the man and would have said more, but Randy's own line started spinning out of his rod as he pulled by a power boat. Whoa, Crapolito! Dave, we got a double! We got a gall darn double! He whooped. Dave's arm wound and wound until he thought it would fall off, slowly but surely reeling the line back to its housing, bringing Dave's prize to the boat with it. Unfortunately for Dave, he saw 2 things. First, a large bird flew low over the water not 50 feet away. The bird was a goose, but it was coal black with a red stripe around its neck and wingtips that looked like they'd been dripped in blood. The second thing he saw was a half-rotted yet snapping monster that came up with his baited hook. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Dave yelled, again sounding like a little 9-year-old girl. Randy looked in piscatorial combat of his own, didn't look at his friend, so he was completely surprised when Dave threw Randy's pop's favorite pole in the water, giving it to the great lords of the deep. What the goddamn hell you do that for? He demanded of his friend. The fish, he stammered. The fish is a zombie fight, just like your Nana, man. Randy looked back down and found a catfish snapping jaws at him from the water's surface, with more dead and rotting fish swimming along with it up toward the boat. Randy spun around. What in tarnation is going on here? That vampire goose is back too, Dave said, pointing. Randy found the bird, but it was flying off into the horizon. This is that damn nanny light, I'm telling you, Randy griped as he watched the water start to boil around the little boat, lifting and dropping as if it were on a heavy rapids in a river. What do we do, Randy? Dave demanded in the same high-pitched voice. We got to get out of here, Randy said and tried to start the engine. And it wouldn't start. At first, Randy thought it might be the lines, but when he checked them, he pulled them out, looked at them. Nothing was wrong. After replacing the lines, he tried again and found the prop stuck. You best hurry, man, Dave said, batting a dead, rotting fish back into the water after they'd managed to get themselves flopped into the boat and tried about their ankles. Wait, Randy said, calming himself. Dave, these are freshwater, lake fish, no teeth. These things will gum us, but that's about it. It's not the fish, Randy, it's the little worms that keep coming out of them, trying to get to us, he said, stomping a flip-flop covered foot down on a little gray wiggling mass in the bottom of the boat. Well, prop seems stuck. You're gonna have to go get wet. Dave's freckled face grew pale. You want me to get in there, he said, incredulous, pointing at the water. You're out of your cotton picking mind. Randy sighed. I can't do it, Dave, he explained, the great sense of exasperation. I gotta try and start this engine. He paused, thinking while Dave continued to fend the zombie fish away from the boat. Besides, we ain't getting out of this unless you do. Fine, Dave said, angry, and began removing his clothes. Once the man was down to his shorts, Randy asked, What the hell are you doing? Though it was too late, and Dave had dropped his shorts, making himself buck naked. You ain't gotta get naked to get in the water. Those ain't swim trunks, and my mama will get mad if I ruin them, he said. Randy just shook his head and turned his back from his best friend. He didn't want to see what that feller was packing. Dave jumped in the water displacement for a moment, driving some of the fish away from the boat. Randy picked up an oar and began slapping the fish that he could reach, headed toward his friend. Looks like we got some weeds in the prop. Give me a sec, Dave said, diving back down. Randy grew nervous as the waters calmed a bit, and his friend didn't come back up after several moments. Just when Randy was about to dive in after his friend, Dave burst through the water screaming like a 5-year-old girl, threatening to go even higher pitch. They got my little guy! Randy, oh no, they got my little guy! Randy moved toward his friend, where his friend had come up to the surface of the water, kicking and spluttered. Man, they're just catfishing. Bass, nothing down there has teeth. God darn it, Randy, get me out of here. I just seen a gar down here. Randy moved faster than the balding, middle-aged man should have been able to have any business moving. Gar were long-nosed fish with sharp fangs lining their mouth. They use their teeth to rip and tear the flesh of their prey. I want kids someday, Randy, Dave screamed, pulling the oar, finally coming into the boat, a long, half-desiccated bass hanging from his unmentionables. Dave ripped the offending zombie fish from him and began to dress. I freed it up, he told Randy. You caught the first one, I guess, Randy joked as he headed back and started the boat. Hey man, that's just wrong. I mean wrong, Dave scolded. Tell your lady, if you ever get one, that you caught it on your worm, he laughed and went to turn the key to start the boat's engine. Water all around them boiling once again, zombie fish jumping into the boat. Dave, his shorts back on, his shirts covering one arm and head, did his best to fend the offended fish out of the boat and get his vision, but his vision was impaired. God darn it, Dave, save one of them so the folks get proof we ain't been lying about them zombie things. And you'll stop accusing us of dumping in his body and drinking all day. Yeah? Dave's voice muffled as he frantically tried to get the rest of his shirt on and his eyes free to see. Randy turned the key. And unfortunately for Randy and Dave, the formerly clogged lines that made up the small engine fuel system flowed too well, and a lot of the gasoline had been dripped into the bottom of the boat where the engine was housed. A few moments, it sat in the stifling summer heat, closed up, In that little compartment, the fumes could build. The fireball was bright and large, the heat washing over the men and the fish, but the boat started, and Randy and Dave never even felt the burn on their skin in the flash of that heat so intense but short-lived. On the way back to his parents' house, Randy asked, "You get that proof?" Dave was watching the windows, looking behind them into the air. "I did, but fire kind of burned it up. You can't really tell." "Well, shit," Randy said, slapping the steering wheel. "I can't tell them about this now." "Why not?" Dave asked. "'Cause they think I got drunk and deluded and made up the first time. I got no proof now. So what do you think they'll say?" Randy asked. Irma and Kevin, Randy's elderly parents, were outside when Randy backed the boat into its spot. Randy's father glowered in his mirror, and Randy knew he'd done something out of line. Great, he thought. Getting out of his truck, he began disconnecting the trailer from it when his father, walking stick leading the way, glared at Randy and Dave. After a few silent minutes when everyone was staring back and forth between themselves, Kevin said, "Why, in carnation, do you boys not have any eyebrows?" "And if you say zombies, boys," Randy's mother added, "I'm gonna wash your fool mouths out with soap for lying." Randy just grimaced and said, "We were drinking Natty Light," and looked down at his feet. Kevin winced. "Never mind," he said. "That shit's devil's water. I thought I raised you better than drink it. We're lucky you didn't sink the whole damn boat." "Dave is the one that bought it," Randy said quickly as he finished unhooking the trailer in haste to get out of there. The end. And so, the darkness again targets our unlikely hero, though sometimes the most ignorant are the most blessed. Until night falls again, we once again release this channel. Nox Mini, fear the night.